everybody, welcome back to this month's episode of Walk Worthy. As we told you last month, we do have a special guest with us here this month, and it is, the big reveal. I'm sure you've been counting down the minutes. It's Rachel Smither. Her and her husband serve in South Africa as missionaries and have been there for 11 years, I think it is.
Yep.
And so we just wanted to bring her on. They're in the country right now. And we wanted to bring her on and kind of find out about her story, how God led them to this, what led up to them making this decision in their life. And so welcome, Rachel. We're glad to have you here today.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
So I guess let's start from the beginning.
Yeah.
How did you grow up? What was your childhood like? Was mission something you thought might happen in your future? Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so I grew up in Marlette, which is like the middle of nowhere, up in more towards the thumb, and I grew up in a pastor's home. So I was a pastor's daughter, and I loved that. It was great. So missions was a big part of my life, and I was exposed to a lot of missionaries, and that helped shape my love for missions. So I always had a real love for missions. And I guess I always thought that it might be possible that someday I would actually become a missionary, but yeah, maybe.
Just like this vague possibility.
Sure, exactly.
So you grow up in this home, and at some point you meet this guy. Where did you and Dan meet?
So Dan and I met, we went to the same high school.
Okay.
So we met there, and we started dating, and there's a lot to that story, but I'm going to leave it out. But yeah, my husband's amazing, but since this is a woman's thing, I'm not going to focus on him.
Okay.
But yeah, so we met and we dated, and then we got married. And at the time, Dan was in pre-med school, so he was going to be a doctor. And I always had a heart for ministry. And so that really didn't coincide, but somehow I just knew God would work that out. So we got married, and I just kept praying about ministry and what that would look like. So
what kind of job was he working when you were first married? And I know you had kids in there. What did that look like, that season of life?
So what happened was Dan was in pre-med, so he at that time he wasn't working. He was like volunteering and doing internships and all that at Children's Hospital. Then what happened was Dan realized that he no longer wanted to be a doctor, that actually God was calling him into a different kind of work with children because he wanted to be a pediatrician. Children was always the focus of his life, but he figured he could minister to children through being a doctor. But God began to change that, and so he switched directions and quit med school and went into he just got hired on staff at my father's church and went into learning how to become a minister, which he had no idea what that entailed. So
From doctor to minister.
Yeah, which made me very happy.
Yeah.
But most people didn't really understand that. They were very confused because ever since Dan was a young kid, we're not supposed to be talking about Dan, but
It's part of the story.
Okay, I love you, Dan. So he, anyway, so people were confused by that.
Because that would seem a very prestigious job to be a doctor and pursue that.
Yes.
You would have to give all of that up.
Yes.
And probably had school debt.
Yes.
And then to go into ministry.
Yes.
From there.
All that.
All crazy.
It was a little crazy, but secretly I was really happy because that meant he was going to take a ministry turn, and that's always where my heart was. So yeah.
Okay, so you're starting to be in ministry, and then somehow you get to South Africa.
Okay, so
what happened?
Where's the jump?
Okay, I'm going to try to make this succinct.
Okay, good luck.
But so we were working on staff at my father's church, which was in Waterford. And during that time, through a series of kind of crazy events, we started this kids ministry to children in Pontiac. And so it just started to explode. And it got so big, actually, that the church no longer could sustain it because we were working with 800, 900,000 kids. And so it became clear at that point that the ministries needed to separate. And so that was the time when Dan and I, along with my father and mother, decided that actually we needed to go into Pontiac and rescue children there, and that the church needed to find a pastor to come in and shepherd them. And so we left the church, all on good terms, and actually some of the people who went there came with us to help launch this thing called Power Company Kids Club. Dan and I worked there for 10 years, just learning from my dad and learning about the ministry. And out of that grew this desire to do the same thing for kids somewhere else. And so Dan resigned his position there and just was seeking and searching, like, God, what's next? What do you want me to do? And came to the conclusion that God told him, okay, it's AIDS orphans in Durban, South Africa. And so, yeah, my husband came to me one day and just said, okay, we're going to Africa. And that was
Okay.
that was news. That was news.
So were you just, like, what was your response to that?
Well, I'll give you a bit of the backstory, because initially when we left our ministry and power company, I said to my husband, I asked him some questions. I said, okay, so, right, the wife questions. Do you think, like, we'll stay in Michigan? And he was like, yeah, I think we'll stay in Michigan. We're really close to both of our families. We love it here. And so, yeah, we'll probably stay in Michigan. I said, okay, that's great. Do you think maybe we would go out of state? And he was like, maybe. That's possible, but I just don't think so. I mean, I just don't think so. And I said, so we would never move out of the country, right?
Trying to, like, prepare yourself.
Kind of. And he was like, no way. God would have to hit me over the head
Wow.
if he wanted us to move out of the country. And so I was like, okay, because it's interesting. When you're young and you consider being a missionary, you feel like as free as a bird. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? You have no attachments, you have no children, you don't have grandparents, you don't have schools, you don't have, your network and your life. When you're 32 and you have kids, that's a totally different picture of picking up and just moving across the world.
Right.
So when he initially told me we're moving to Durban, South Africa, I said, I didn't really know what. Like, what do you do? What do you do with that? So I just sat there for a minute, I think. I'm remembering what it looked like, the whole thing. And
Like, did you hear that right? Or
and I knew I did, because Dan is not the kind of man to just say that.
okay.
Yeah.
He's not like a dreamer and I think no. When he says something, it is.
Wow.
And so I knew, okay. And I really didn't have an intelligent way to respond to that at all.
Did you feel interested in that, or was it
No,
frightening?
not
for
at
you?
that time. I didn't know what to feel. I just, I didn't know what to feel.
Okay, so give me a timeline. About when is this? Like, in the year? Like, where are we at?
Okay, this was, gosh, let me think. I want to say this was like maybe October 2005.
Okay, so he comes home and says, we're moving to South Africa.
Yeah.
And when from there did you actually leave?
We left in January of 2008.
Okay, so you had a little bit of time to process through this and come to...
Yes.
Did you feel like when you left that you were fully on board with this? Or were you following your husband? You know what I'm saying?
I do. I think, I'll say it this way, that the day I married Dan, my life was his. It was no longer mine. When I married him, it was to answer the call of God on his life, and whatever that was going to be and whatever that was going to look like, I was all in.
Okay.
And so in that sense, it didn't really matter. It really wasn't about being on board. That happened when we got married. It was more just figuring out, how do I do that well?
Did you feel like you had to work through when he says South Africa and maybe you're not quite there yet? You know what I mean? The process, because sometimes our husbands will make decisions that maybe he's switching a job or moving states or across the world, whatever that looks like, where maybe you're not sure that your heart is fully invested in that thing. What would you say to a wife that is in that place right now? You know what I mean? I mean, we know the right answer, that we follow our husbands, that we allow them to lead our home, but there still are emotions and things that you have to go through to do that well. I like how you said that you do that well.
Yes.
What would you say to somebody that's there?
I would say that that's a loaded question. But I guess my response to that would be that if you, I mean, it sounds so black and white, but if you know why God put you here, because in the beginning when God created women, there was one singular reason why he did that, and it was so that women could help men. And it's interesting to me because God didn't say, I'm enough, Adam. You don't actually need anything else. Just find all of your fulfillment in me. He actually saw a missing piece and said, I'm going to create something just for you that's going to be amazing, and it's going to back you up, and it's going to make you the man who you need to be, and it's called a woman. And if we are clear on that role, it doesn't always make it easy, but it gives you a focus. It should give you a focus. And so as a wife, my focus, if it gets out of whack, I go back to that, because it's very clear that my role as a wife isn't necessarily to have opinions about things that aren't going to help my husband. Those opinions, although they might be strong, if they're not going to help my husband, then I'm not fulfilling my role. So I give him the opinions or the desires or the things that are actually going to help him. And that's when I feel best about myself as a wife, is when I'm helping my husband. I found that when I try to help me, everything goes wrong. When I try to help my husband, somehow God works all of that out. And so, was that easy? No. I mean, that is not easy to just pick up your kids in your whole life and move. Trust me when I say it is so hard. But I am so glad that I have the joy and the pleasure of helping my husband do what he's supposed to do, because that's the best version of me.
That's good.
So you moved to Africa. Did people ever say why they're like, are there not lost people here that need to be reached? Did people ever like come at you with that type of thing?
People came at us with everything. What about your family? What about, kids in Pontiac? Like, you're working with kids in Pontiac. This is so confusing. What about this? What about that? How are you going to do this? You can't just go and show up, I mean, there were so many people who thought we had lost our minds and just didn't get it. And to be honest, we didn't even get it.
Right.
That's
kind of the answer, like, I don't know.
So crazy and foreign, and we just knew that's what God had told us to do. So, yeah.
So what did that look like when you actually got there? Did you know what you were going to do? Did you know exactly where you were going? Or, this ministry was just built from, the ground up. Like, you got there, like, okay, let's do this.
So when we showed up, we didn't know anybody there. And so we weren't, like, connected to a ministry. Although we had the support of churches and people, it was a very small network. And we didn't know the exact communities that we would be working in. Yeah, we really literally landed with 12 suitcases and said, let's figure this out.
And how many kids, and how old was your youngest?
We had four girls. We have four girls.
Still have. Praise the Lord.
Thank heavens. But at the time, my oldest was 7, and then a 5-year-old, and a 2-year-old, and a 6-week-old.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
And I just remember getting off the plane.
You're not even totally in your right mind 6 weeks after you have a baby. Anyways.
I mean, yeah.
Oh my word.
And I please understand when I say this, but when we got off the plane and we had done it, I felt like Superman. You know what I mean? Like, yes. Little did I realize that was the smallest piece of it. You know, I
Right.
mean, yeah. So
I mean, was there ever a point where you wondered, what have we done?
all the time, even sometimes now, I pinch myself and I'm like,
We're still here.
I live in Africa. But definitely in that first year, a lot of that.
So you have 4 little kids, which is not an easy job, even if you have family and community and babysitters and all
Right.
that. You have none of that. You don't
Right.
have a church family. You
Right.
don't have someone that you can call so you and Dan can go on date night. You don't have a mom. You don't have a mother-in-law. You have none of that, right? It's
Right.
you and Dan and your 4 small children.
Exactly right.
So for you, Dan's out working on mission stuff and all that stuff, right?
Dan's saving the world.
Dan is saving the world
Yes.
one child at a time.
Yes, he is.
What are you doing?
Okay, so the first year, most of the time I was in the house. I hardly left the house. And it was kind of like this every week, because we had one car. So every week Dan would drop me off at the grocery store and he'd say, okay, you've got 2 hours. And I would, trying to figure things, where's the chicken? And you don't know, why don't we have bananas? And I mean, just you can't, you don't always have access. But anyway, that was a trip. And so 2 hours later, he would show up and he would take me home. And so that was one outing per week. And then every Friday night, Dan somehow worked it out in our budget, which is laughable because we were broke. But he would take our family out to dinner at like this family restaurant every Friday. So he would get me out of the house. And that was a priority to him. And then we would go to church on Sunday together as a family. And that was about it as far as my leaving the house.
So sometimes when we all have young kids, moms, whatever, we can complain about not having places to go or it's overwhelming. I'm stuck in the house with these kids. You were stuck in the house on an entirely different level than probably any American mom has ever been, because you didn't leave, you didn't have a car, you didn't even probably know where you were going, especially at first, even if you wanted to leave, and you had no one to leave your children with. So I would imagine that was probably lonely, challenging, painful.
Yep.
How did you emotionally get through that time? You have no support system at all. It's just you and Dan's gone. What did you do to get yourself through that time? Because you have a choice, right? You could either just fall apart and be depressed or
Totally.
try to do this well.
Yes.
How do you do it well?
So I think 2 things, and maybe both of these are obvious, but number 1, I determined that if I was going to be, I guess in the very literal sense of the phrase stay-at-home mom, that I was going to kill it. Like, if this is what I have and this is what is in front of me, then I am going to be amazing. I'm gonna learn how to cook better. The house is gonna be spotless. I'm gonna buy a jump rope and learn, I'm gonna exercise that way. I mean, I'm gonna play with my kids, and I'm gonna make this experience the best thing for them, because I realized, again, is my role is to be a helpmeet to my husband, that the best way that I could help him and the future of his calling in our ministry was that our home was a happy place, a safe place, a solid place. And that comes from me, a peaceful place. Because as women, that's our role, is to make our house, make our house a home. But it's true. And so that was one thing that I said to myself, is that I will not fail at this. If this is what my husband needs and this is what our family needs, I'm going to be the best stay-at-home mom I can be. And so that year was a lot of dying to myself, which is painful, and a lot of self-discovery, how selfish I am, how needy I am, how lonely life can be, how how small life can get, and it also, so thing number 2 that I said to myself is that I realized that basically, in this sense, I'm a schmuck. Like, because I had never done that before. I had never been forced to live such a small, narrow, what we would view as being so small and so unimportant. It just made my reliance on Christ so much deeper. Because what I discovered about myself was that I'm just not that great. You know, I mean, I don't have what this takes. And it's Christ in me that gives me the strength to do that. And so that was a tough year.
Yeah.
Don't ever do it.
If you have a choice,
Tough year.
don't.
You know,
But it produces fruit, you know, that
Yes,
you
it
wouldn't
does.
be who you are had you not. And you have a choice. You're either going to press into the Lord and let Him give you the strength and let Him encourage your heart to be who He's called you to be in a very, what people would call difficult and lonely place, or you're just going to be a mess. If you would have gone the other way and not succeeded there, where do you think your family would be right now?
Oh my gosh, my family would be a mess.
I mean, possibly out of ministry, possibly,
Definitely,
you know.
possibly. I mean, there's all that. You know, as a wife, when you're a submissive wife, you feel like that means you don't have any power. But actually, you have the power to ruin your family. And had I not been willing to do that, and obviously that's all the grace of God. You know, not that I would boast in myself,
Right.
right? But by the grace of God, He gave me clarity on that. And if I had not submitted to that, there might not be a Key of Hope. I mean, my girls would be a mess. My husband would be probably angry and aggravated. You know, I mean, all the things that we know come from trying to buck the system as a wife, as a godly wife. So life would look very different.
That's huge. Okay, so I guess tell us about the ministry that you are doing right now
Okay.
at Key of Hope. What did you know? You kind of went through those years of figuring it out. I'm sure there's still an element of that happening every year.
Yeah.
But what does it look like? What are you guys doing right now?
So what does Rachel do? What does Dan do? What does Key of Hope do?
Key of Hope.
Yeah,
But
and
then
then tell
what's your role
yeah.
within it? I guess.
Yeah.
Too.
Okay,
All of it.
so
All of it.
Tell us everything.
Okay, all of it. So we'll start with Key of Hope. Key of Hope, the primary focus of Key of Hope is to reach lost children with a focus on kids who have been orphaned, who live in poverty, or who have been affected by AIDS, with the gospel and good news of Jesus Christ. But we don't stop there. Really, we want to take them and mentor them long term and disciple them and bring them into our family. So that's the focus of Key of Hope. When we moved there, we started doing that with just one kid. Now we're working with like almost 2,000 kids in different ways and in different capacities, but and really hoping that will grow as God gives us the opportunity. So we do that through all kinds of different things, just like you guys do here at the Rock. I mean, you find ways to love people and to reach people in their context where they are, and that's what we're doing with kids. So we have sports and music and after-school teaching, and we help provide kids with documents, and you have to pay for school there, so we get kids in school and we pay for their school fees, all kinds of ways. But so it has grown into something I think much bigger than we could have ever imagined, and I guess that's what God does. So that's exciting. So we have now a staff of 25 over there, and we have some staff here in America who help make that possible. Amazing, wonderful people. But my role, I mean, oh my gosh, you guys, and Aaron, I would have to say you would know this, and Lindsay, I don't know you well, but maybe your role is like whatever's next.
Yeah.
In some ways, I mean, so supposedly I'm the music director, and I do things with music, but I do a lot of things, whatever's in front of me to do. So that can be marketing, it can be. Let's see, I run hospitality and mission teams, and yeah, I do a lot of things. So
You guys are in a difficult culture. I know, culture's culture, but
yeah,
there's a lot of struggle. There's poverty and racial tension and lots of different things in South Africa. I would imagine that can weigh on you guys, get hard. You see these kids, some have AIDS or they're orphans. And you love these children, and that can be burdensome, right? On the tough days, what keeps you going? What makes you not quit?
I think quitting has never been an option. It's something that, like, okay, there are days when I think to myself, oh my gosh, what I wouldn't give to just drive down Telegraph Road and, you know what I'm saying, and just be free. But that looks totally different than saying, I'm quitting.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, quitting just was never an option. God called us, and when or if this season of our life is over, He will make that clear. But when God calls you something and He gives you a task, you don't quit. It's like when you get married, you don't quit.
Right.
It's not an option. So I guess your feelings submit to the calling.
I like that. That's
Yeah.
good.
I feel like kind of a theme through everything that you've said is you decided to follow Jesus like a long time ago, and nothing's going to keep you from that. Nothing's going to change that. You've made up your mind that you're following Him. And so just in all your answers, well, this is what God called me to, like you said, quitting is not an option. I think that's such a huge thing for people to grab a hold of. We want to follow Jesus, but we only want the parts that we want.
Right.
And like when He has all of you, then being obedient to Him, it's not, oh, do I want to do this or not? It's He is your Lord. It's who I'm going to be, who He's called me to be. And I mean, I think that's something that is a struggle, I'm sure, for every woman, but it just, in all of your answers, that's just, sounds like that's what you come back to. Like, He is my Lord. This is what I said I was going to do. This is what He called me to. And I'm going to do it. And I think if we could grab hold of that,
Right.
how much more different would our families be, our church, and whatever the ministry that God is calling us to. And I think that's huge for us to grab a hold of.
And being willing to let go of even our own comfort and allowing even our emotions to die to the call. That yes, it's hard. Yes, there are times when maybe you want to quit. Yes, there are times that maybe it doesn't feel good in that moment to persevere through and be faithful. But that's part of what we're called to do because, like you said, He's our Lord, He's our Master, and we've been giving marching orders that we can't just quit on until He says that we can. I like that.
So I guess if you had a challenge for a woman watching today, one thing to encourage her or challenge her in, what would that be? I know that's such a vague question. But, if there was...
Brush your teeth. Oh, gosh. I think because this is a continual challenge for all of us and me as women, it is to know who we are in Christ and why He created us, and to really work through that and understand it. And instead of hating that, which is submit to your husband, because as I submit to my husband, I submit to Christ. You can't submit to Christ and not submit to your husband. That's impossible. And And so I would say, for me, the ongoing challenge in my life, and I believe the biggest way that I honor God is by honoring my husband. It's not how many kids we reach. It's not how much music I write. It's not how many concerts my choir sings at. It has nothing to do with my gifts and talents. Because I truly believe that all of those things were put inside of me to serve my husband, who has received a calling from God. And that's how I serve God. And we're so uncomfortable with that as women. And we fight it and we hate it. And I would just challenge myself and all of us to make peace with that. And because once you do, and it's an ongoing process, but every time you move forward and continue to, okay, here's another thing that, I feel differently than my husband, or I have my own opinions, but every time that I am willing to submit to Christ, which means I have to submit to my husband, and I make peace with that, I become a stronger woman.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have this perception that being a strong woman is not being submissive and figuring it out. And I don't need you because I have a brain. Mm-hmm. I don't need you because I have an education. That's fine. You can think that way, but you don't understand how I feel because you're a man. But God called us as women to understand our men, mm-hmm. not for men to understand women. That's not what God said. We help our men, and our men love us as Christ loved the church. So they protect us, and they provide for us, and they die for us, and they lay down their life. But my role is to, if you can do all that for me, what do you want me to do for you? How can I serve you? And to just be at peace with that, and to figure out how to do that well, because I believe that if we as a woman truly understood that and how much power that gives us, our men would be changing the world.
That's good. Okay, I have a final question, kind of a silly question. Okay. By decade, okay?
By decade, oh
okay,
gosh.
So
okay.
What would you say to your 20-year-old self?
Okay. You have a lot to learn.
Okay, your 30-year-old self. Just give it to me in a quick, you know what I mean?
Hang in there.
Your 40-year-old self.
By now, hopefully, you should have a few things figured out.
If not, you better get
a
to
few.
work.
Right? I guess that's what I would say.
Okay, I love it.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks,
so
guys.
great.
It was a pleasure.
I hope you guys enjoyed our time that we spent with Rachel today. If you're interested in Key of Hope, the ministry that they're doing there, we will put their website down in the show notes. Check that out, how maybe you can partner with them or just find out more about what they're doing in South Africa. So thanks for joining us today. I hope that God spoke to you through something. If you want to subscribe, like, comment, share this with your friends. We really want people to just hear more about what God is doing around the world, about what he's doing in individuals like Rachel, and how that can teach and affect your life and what he can do in your life too. So thanks for joining us, guys. Have a great week.